what's my priority right now? Because we can only have one priority at a time. The word priority, if you go all the way back to the Latin roots, it means first. So what's the plural of first? Like you can't even say it first, like it's hard. So like knowing your priority in each moment, right? That allows you to be appropriate today and in the moments today.
Hello and welcome to the Show Your Value podcast, where we explore the art of value creation in three macro buckets: material value creation, emotional energy value creation, and spiritual value creation. I'm your host, Lee Benson. Today, my very special guest is Jay Papasan. Jay is a best-selling author, CEO, executive coach, and one of the world's leading voices on focus, productivity, and achieving extraordinary results. He is the author of The One Thing, the #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller that has sold more than 4 million copies in over 40 languages. Amazing. And has co-authored 12 books with nearly 7 million copies collectively sold worldwide. As CEO of Productive, the One Thing company, Jay coaches business owners and senior leaders on navigating growth, leadership, and the next stage of their business while staying focused on what truly matters most. Jay, welcome. So great to have you here.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me. I always feel weird when I'm hearing my own bio. I'm just like, should I say anything right now?
Well, I mean, that was a pretty condensed version of what could have been probably a 30-minute read if I really wanted to get into it. I loved reading your book, The One Thing, getting ready for this. And I wrote a book titled Your Most Important Number. It's getting every team focused on how do you define how you create value? What's the best measure of that, and focus on it? Everything else is subordinate. So we're kind of on the same journey. I was just curious, what was the evolution? And I think I understand from listening to a lot of your interviews, but what was the evolution that got you to the one thing in this concept?
Great question. And I love that you talk about routines as well, because routines, habits, systems are how we build consistency into our lives. Like once we know the one thing is a big part of the journey, but doing it regularly, that's the other half. So the book evolved from an essay. During my almost 26 years as an executive at Keller Williams, I kind of wore a lot of hats, but many of those years I ran our education department. And we were building a course for new entrepreneurs, how to know when they had earned the right to hire their first employee. And that's a moment that's fraught with a lot of decisions, right? Do we have our revenue consistent enough to take on salary? And, it's a nervy point, but it's also a point where a lot of entrepreneurs will decide whether hiring people is for them or not. If they get it wrong, they may throw the baby out with the bathwater. If they get it right, they may think they're a genius before their time. So I had a lot of fun. I spent, a couple of years working on that with the team. We interviewed like 100 plus entrepreneurs. Great time. And Gary's like, let me write an essay at the beginning. And he came back after the weekend, and it was called The Power of One. And it was all about this idea that the one thing for an entrepreneur is you've got to have lead generation, marketing, prospecting, however you get business. Doesn't matter how good you are at what you do. If you have no customers to serve, you're going to be in trouble at some point. And I just remember reading it, and I turned to him because my background, Gary, he's the real estate guy. He got a real estate degree. He started Keller Williams Realty in his 20s. And with a lot of help from everybody around him, we grew it to the #1 brand in the world. And me, I'm an English guy. I'm a book guy. I was in publishing. So I was acquiring books at HarperCollins in the 90s. And I looked up and I just said, Gary, I think this is a book. And he looked at me and he's like, I was hoping you would say that because I thought the same thing. And so the genesis of the idea, that's really the start. And we then, our former partner, Dave Jenks, who we co-authored several books, he passed away in the interim. But at that time, he was still with us. And I remember we created a thesis for someone to identify their one thing and try to live it, right? How can I know what my true priority is in this season? Or in a bigger sense, like for me in general, like what's my calling? Big questions. And we framed it out. And then we spent the next 4.5 years researching and writing it. And it, of course, you've written a book. It changes once the idea gets off of the flip chart or the dry eraser board, and actually you start evolving. So it evolved a lot, but that's kind of the true origin story. is that we huddled in that room for 2 weeks, outlined it, and then we dove into the research for multiple years.
Yeah, in the couple of books that I wrote, I materially rewrote each of them 4 times.
Oh, yeah.
As you go through, it's like, this is a great idea to start with, but wait a minute, I'm not sure it's gonna resonate, and the one thing is just how you simplified the language. You wrote it in a way, that it connects with so many people. It's not for high level academics or, I mean, it's language that applies, and obviously selling so many copies it's saying, yeah, you did a really good job of that.
Can I
Probably.
get nerdy on that just a little bit for you?
Oh, please. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you like getting a little nerdy, after we wrote the book, I'm just a student of the game of publishing, and it's my calling. I think that if I'm not writing books, I'm not ultimately doing my job. That's the thing that I think I was put on earth to do. I don't know that I'm better than everybody else, but it's what I need to do, and I'm going to do it as good as I can. I read an essay where they broke down the best-selling books of all time. Agatha Christie, Harry Potter, Hemingway, Faulkner, like these are people that are considered the classics. And they sold lots and lots, millions and millions of copies. And what they did is they studied the writing level of all of those authors. And the takeaway was that Hemingway, who's considered by many the greatest of all time, wrote at a fourth grade level. And one of my writing professors, I studied writing in NYU. I remember we wouldn't write short stories per se. We would study Kerouac or Faulkner or Hemingway. He would talk to us about what made that writer that writer. And then our assignment was to go write at least 5 pages of anything in that author's voice. Faulkner, kind of easy to pretend. Kerouac, kind of easy. Hemingway, nobody did it. He wrote the simplest, but it doesn't mean it wasn't sophisticated and elegant. And so my takeaway is if you want to reach a large audience, remove the friction from your language. The New York Times is written at an 11th grade level. And you think, well, that's not even out of high school. It's still difficult for a lot of people to process long sentences, big words. So I actually trained myself to never publish if it was higher than a 6th grade level. And I ran the entire one thing through it. We weren't even thinking, and that's written at a 5th grade level. So hopefully you didn't think, oh, this is Jack and Jill ran up the hill, but we use simple human language, which I think is sometimes harder to describe complex ideas.
I actually think it's brilliant, the way you did it. And I always think about, I don't communicate in all forms to try to sound smart like a lot of folks do out there. I communicate to convey value and what's the language that's actually going to work. And yeah, I can use big
Yes.
words, but if that cuts 80% of my audience out, I just screwed up if that's my approach. One of the biggest concepts out of, and there's so many ways, like, I don't think there's anything new in all of recorded history, by the way, but how it's packaged can be new, and I think you packaged it really, really well. This concept of purpose, priority, productivity.
Yes.
And I when I talk and I'd like to just dig a little bit into each of those. When I talk to folks about purpose, um, almost always it's what should it be, not what is it for you? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, like how will people receive this? It has to be big. It has to be this other thing. Like I have such a clear purpose, and it took me decades to fully evolve into it, and it guides everything I do every single day. It's incredible. But talk about purpose. Like, what's your advice for figuring that out with and not making it what you think other people will like?
Like most people listening, I wrestled with it, right? Or they are going to wrestle with it because you kind of hear it often enough. What's your big why? What's your purpose? What's your mission? That it's something that we should have. And should is almost always a shame-based statement. The moment we utter it about ourselves, we're taking someone else's standards and trying to apply it to ourselves, right? So my coaches have always listened for when I say that, and I try to listen for my clients so that we can at least identify when we're borrowing standards and trying to throw them at ourselves because we usually beat ourselves up a little bit in the process. But I was thinking, how can I authentically travel around the world and promote a book when I don't clearly know my own purpose? And I wrestled with it for a while and tried to simplify it. And we have a model in the book, what are you passionate about? What are you good at? It's a little bit borrowed from a lot of different places. But if you can identify, usually by looking in the rear view mirror, if you look forward, you're almost always bringing other people's ideas. But if you look backwards and ask, when I've been the most fulfilled in my life, what were the things I was doing and who was I doing them for? Those are usually clues, right? So if you've lived a little life, you can look back and what about the jobs that might have been highly paid or very prestigious that you were kind of miserable in, right? We've all done work that was either stressful and fulfilling or just stressful. And the difference is often when there's meaning attached to it. And so do a little journaling. That's what I used to teach people. Today, if I was going to rewrite the book, I would probably add a little section in the section on purpose on core values. That's been my unlock. I got it from, I think Brene Brown was the first person. I'd done the exercises over the years, but it wasn't resonating. But at the end of one of her books, she talked about her top two core values and she debated, she wanted it to be family first, but actually it was courage. And she wanted to live courage as an act of devotion to her family. So there was the should, oh, I'm a mom, I should put my family first. But then she realized her authentic self lived courage. And in doing so, was fulfilling her role as a mom. And I remember that stuck with me and I thought about it. And then I read Essentialism by Greg, McCown. What's his first name? I can't think of it. Essentialism. He talked about a process where they were interviewing candidates. They decided on the top three things. And if people weren't a 9 out of 10, they didn't get to move through the process. Got really clear what are the three qualities we're looking for. If they're not a 9 out of 10, they're a no. And I kind of combined those and we built a core values exercise. Mine are impact, family, and abundance. Again, just like Brene, I can say that's one category where we have something in common. I wanted to say I'd lead with being a father and a husband first. But the reality is the things that make me the most passionate are the things where I believe I can make an impact. If I can make someone's life better, easier, help them navigate a trouble, anything like that, I walk away, no matter how hard it was, filled up and full of energy. That's the heart of me writing books. It cannot take me away from my family. And I believe in abundance. It used to be wealth in the beginning, but I thought, I don't like games where I make money and other people don't. I don't like zero sum games where there has to be losers. I gravitate like in authorship. Someone buys my book, they're going to buy 5 other ones if they really are interested in the topic. People don't have to just choose one, even though we talk about it. So I think core values is the 30-minute exercise that can get people really on the path to understanding their purpose. Because now I've got a decision-making tool. Does this big role or this big decision, how do I rate it? 9 out of 10 on impact, family, and abundance. If it's 9 out of 10, it's a go. If it's not, I need to really think carefully about making those commitments. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. So the big thing in there, and you said a lot, but the big thing is fulfillment. My most important internal number is fulfillment. I don't think anybody can be happy all the time. It can be fleeting. But one thing for me that I've noticed, if I'm doing the right stuff, I'm aligned with my mission, my purpose, essentially, internal fulfillment grows every year. And
Yes.
that's pretty amazing. So if you're locking into that, whatever it is, and it took me a minute to figure that out, and I qualify for Medicare in 2 months, so I've been around a while. But if you're in line with that, I think you're on the right track. But if you're going through these exercises and the literally thousands of books out there on how to come up with values and purpose and all of it, and it doesn't resonate, it's doing what you talk about. I've heard you say many times, you can fully accomplish your entire to-do list and accomplish nothing. You're literally accomplishing nothing if it doesn't resonate.
Right.
So I've actually simplified. I've gone through a lot of them. My purpose is driving holistic value creation behaviors in the world, net positive, material, emotional, spiritual. Spiritual is about connectedness, and that's like everything. And what I value, it's distilled into one thing: elevating human consciousness, starting with myself, and
Hmm.
everything else is subordinate to that. And when you talk about being in
That's
stress,
beautiful, by the way. I love the words net positive,
yeah,
right?
it's
Like
got
there's usually unpleasantness in there, but is it net positive? So like I can tell that you've really been thoughtful in that statement.
yeah, thank you. And if a company gets a lot of accolades because it made $1 billion in a quarter in profit, but it caused $2 billion in damage to the environment, that's not net positive, and I won't celebrate it. Sorry. If it even if it's net positive on the financial side, but it did horrific things on the emotional energy and connectedness side for all the team members, that's not positive either. So, yeah, like I've really thought through it, and I feel like the more we figure out this elevating human consciousness, to me, the purpose of human existence, um, almost if you the more you go, the less things are stressful
Yeah.
because you understand it. You're not getting emotionally hijacked or everything else that goes in with it. But how does that resonate with you when I package the two of those things?
It sounds perfect and it sounds like you've found like your fine tuning with the universe, right? And when you get that, decisions get easy. When you know your values, decisions get easy. And when you know your purpose, decisions get easy. And what am I celebrating? What am I fighting against? All of those things get a little bit clearer when you get in touch with your values. But most of us aren't taught to really understand that. We're given values maybe in a church pew or at home when your dad says, in our family, or your mom says, in our family, we, and those are part of our fabric, right? That's where we came from. But ultimately, we have to decide who we want to be. So, my friend Simone Stolzoff just wrote a great book called How to Not Know. And just the title gave me the heebie-jeebies because I'm a curious person and I want to know the answer. Don't make me uncomfortable with uncertainty, but that's what the book does. In that book was a wonderful question that I realized that I've leaned into, I've helped my clients lean into. In a crisis, one of the chapters he explores, he says the most important question you ask is, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up in this? Because now, without really saying it, you're like, what values do I hope to put on display? And I've walked into crises knowing that I could violate my values and not lose money. But it makes me okay with losing money if I'm going to live my values because they're not your values if you're not willing to pay a price. But like deciding who we fundamentally choose to be, it's a very liberating thing. It makes the losses easier to bear, the hard work easier to do, all of the things. I could go on, but this is a big topic.
It is, and then having the integrity to stick with it when you might lose, because I see a lot of situational integrity or ethics out there. Like
Oh,
they can say all the right things, but when it comes down to, and money's an interesting way of finally seeing somebody. If it's a material amount for them, you see who they really are as they navigate through it.
yeah. There becomes a point where they feel immune from other people's opinions and they really display who they are. Uh, I think someone said, more money doesn't change you. It allows you to live more authentically who you always were. And the joke was always, Elvis always had bad taste. And when he had a lot of money, he decorated Graceland. And I'm from Memphis, so I can say that very legitimately, right? And, he had questionable taste. Okay, great. But he got to run with it and it was on full display when he had all the wealth in the world. And it's true for all of us. I think one word that you didn't put in there today was social media and a lot of brand management. We see a lot of performative values as well, right? Where people are performing their values in public, but it's really in private when no one's watching is when they're really revealed.
Yeah. There's a lot of virtue signaling going on in the world, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Look at me and what I do and what I am, and buy from me because of this, but authenticity is what we really want. Okay, so purpose, priority, productivity. Let's get to priority. I've got my calendar system. Everybody has their system. Priority, it's such a great point in your book. What's your filter for what actually gets on your calendar? And so this priority piece, like how do you line up your day, your week, your month, your year, sort of directionally? Talk about that.
Wonderful. There's an illustration in the book where it's like an iceberg and above the water level is productivity. right? And for businesses, it's profitability often. And people see that, oh, wow, Lee's a really productive person. I wish it was like him. Well, to be productive, I believe, means you're acting on your priorities, right? Because you could be busy, right? Busyness is a blight in our current world where doing lots of things counts for doing important things. It's not the same thing, right? You alluded to it earlier. You can run through your days, never have time to eat lunch or anything, come home just absolutely exhausted, and your spouse asks you, "What did you do today?" And you're stumped in terms of what you could actually say you accomplished. You did a lot of activity, and productivity are not the same thing. So acting on your priorities is productivity. And I use that little thing, and below the waterline is priority, and below priority is purpose. And it's actually a diagnostic tool. If someone has a priority problem, they're not clear on their purpose, right? And it's a business thing. What are we here for? What is our fundamental value proposition? That should determine the things that we prioritize. And when we actually do those things, we're very productive in living that thing. So that's how they're connected in my mind. So if I'm talking to someone who has a productivity issue, I'm going to start with priorities. So what are all the things that you do? And if you had to choose only one that would make your business thrive, what would that be? Most people know the answer. They're just not acting on it because they're not clear. And if we really, really understood our priorities at a visceral level and even better, connected them to our purpose, it becomes really hard to stop those people, right? When you say that's a quote, man on a mission, right? A person on a mission, what do you picture in your mind? Someone with their blinders on. They're moving through their day with purpose. They have their priorities clear, right? They are acting. They are not distractible because those three things have magically lined up. We experience that. We have those days. We called it in our very first book, the day before vacation miracle. Man, the day before you're going to the beach for a week, you're a really productive individual. You don't read the junk mail. You don't mess around. You make sure that your dog is getting boarded. You cancel your things that are going to happen, right? You pack your bags. You somehow wash 7 loads of laundry. Why? Because we're really clear that we don't want to open our laptop on the beach. We'd really like to clear the decks so we can actually be free. So we don't get to live that day on repeat, but if you follow some of the simple concepts in the book, get a little clear about the purpose, your purpose and your business's purpose. Based on that, what are my real priorities? Now you can actually be more productive on average day by day. So I didn't really answer your question. I felt like you were going towards a system, but like start there.
No, not really. I mean, the second part of it, like, how do you prioritize? And I actually just wrote down, live every day at work like it's a day before you're going on a week vacation or something like that. Like, seriously, what a great productivity hack to have that mindset when you go in.
Yeah.
So in purpose, I think we probably should. There's that bad word, right? But I think it's healthy if we all have a purpose personally. But the business has a purpose. The community you engage with has a purpose. You've got these purpose buckets everywhere that you're choosing to engage with or not. And then with that, we're setting up priorities. Now, productivity to me kind of gets down to let me back up. I think knowing what to do is relatively straightforward. Some people get super stuck, but it's relatively straightforward. You might put a little bit of work into it. Doing it's the challenge.
Yes.
So being productive. You talk about time blocking. My first 90 minutes every morning, I get up pretty early. Is I grab a cup of coffee and I play guitar, and then I time block to exercise, and it's a minimum of an hour on the exercise too. Sometimes up to 2 hours, and then I've got
Wow.
the daytime blocked out, and I do this. I do it every day, and it feels amazing. It's not, oh, look how much I get done. It feels good going through life this way. It's like you're in this, and I don't know what your metaphorical vehicle would be, but you're in a spaceship, you're in a submarine, whatever, and you're always going to be there on this sort of. I feel like how we feel going through life is everything. So time blocking really helps me. And if I don't do that, I feel like I'm manning the rapid response desk with my 30 texts an hour and emails and everything else going on. So what's your advice around productivity?
Okay. So one of the things that I don't like to quote myself, And and I've just been told, Jay, get used to it. If you're going to be a public figure, you've got to do it. But so one of my saying is the world doesn't need another way to set goals. We need another way to have a relationship with them. So the foundation of everything for me is about 20 minutes a week, 30 minutes, maybe. I've been doing it. God, I did the math once. Since September of 2000, I have had a 30-minute meeting with my goals virtually every single week. It's one of the systems I learned, and I can trace it back to the very first time I learned the system. And we've built on it, and a lot of it shows up in the one thing. We have our big goals for life. We break them into 5-year goals. Those then we visit those someday goals and 5-year goals on an annual basis with our purpose. Like, what are the big things that we want for the future? I've been doing a retreat with my wife for over 18 years where we take a day off. We maybe go to a hotel, get away from the kids and the dogs, and we give ourselves a little space to dream. Doers don't make space to dream because they're always doing. They have no margin to think about where they should be going because they're always doing. And there are a lot of people who are dreamers who don't make space to do, which is where we're going. But we have those goals. And at the beginning of the year, I pick my personal and professional goals that I want for the year, usually no more than 3 or 4. And then each month I will ask, based on my annual goal, what do I have to achieve this month to feel like I'm on track? And it's as much art as science. But now I've got a goal for the year. Each month becomes a milestone on the journey. And then during the week, each week, this is the true 20-minute meeting. I'll ask, based on what have I accomplished so far this month, what do I need to do this week to feel like I'm on track for my milestone for the month? And those tend to be activities. So we can't time block goals. Hey, I want to have lower stress is one of my goals. I can't time block 30 minutes every day that says lower stress, but I can time block, play music, meditate, journal, go for a walk in nature with no devices. There's lots of things I can do that will lower my stress levels and my heart rate, right? So at a weekly level, I'm going to identify the activities that I believe will put me on track over the course of the 4 or 5 weeks I have that month to hit my milestone. That's what goes on my calendar. Now, I time block activities, and that's a real step that people miss, right? They say, a lot of entrepreneurs, I was working with this woman, coaching with her. She had a beautiful calendar. 2 hours every morning said lead gen time. I was like, I love that for entrepreneurs. You're out there, you're looking for your next client. You're always putting people in the top of the funnel so that you always have people to serve. And I was like, great. What specifically are you doing on Monday morning for those 2 hours? She didn't know the answer. And I said, that's the gap. That's the gap. So think through, what is it I'm doing? So as a musician, like Gary, you alluded to it before we started recording, when he wanted to be a guitar player, he would practice for 20 minutes a day. He knew the kind of guitar songs he wanted to play, and he would practice scales. He would just get his hands so that they could play the notes that he would need to play that music. And it didn't require a lot of thought. It was kind of meditative, but he was building the muscle memory to play the songs that he wanted to play over time. And so a specific activity that goes on your calendar gets done. And I call it making an appointment with yourself. This is my definition of time blocking to do your most important work. I don't think that my day needs to be time blocked from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. I have things that are rituals. We have a Wednesday night date night. Friday night for many years till our kids left was movie night. We have rituals. We have routines. We work out with a trainer in the morning, right? I do my coffee and journaling and reading in the morning after I work out. So like I've got routines that naturally occupy slots in my day. But when I look at the rest of my day, like I'm a book writer. I've got 4 days a week with a 2-hour blog. And as best I can, like right now, I'm working really hard on chapter 2. Hey, what do I need to do this week to feel like I'm getting to the end of that draft so that the next week I can work on chapter 3 or chapter 4 or wherever I need to go? So can we break down our goals? It's a skill not many of us are taught. What are the milestones along the way so we have little things to celebrate? right? So it doesn't just always feel like it's in the future. But then how do I identify the activities that will naturally lead to those outcomes? And that's a little bit of art and science. It might take a little experimentation if you're new to playing music, but you can also ask a coach. You can hire a music teacher. You can watch YouTube videos. Getting the answer might require a little bit of work, but today the answers are out there.
And what do you want to accomplish? And what's the best way to get there and be realistic about what it's going to take
Yeah.
going through and everybody does that differently. So I guess a couple of things. So I've started 8 companies from scratch. I'm CEO of 2 today.
Wow.
Biggest one had 540 employees. Today, with all the collective things that I'm leading, there's probably a couple hundred employees, dotted around the world. Um, and here's how I think about it. So I've got time blocks, things where I have to focus, or I'm not going to improve this in this way,
Yeah.
or create this strategy, or whatever it is. But I look at all of the areas of my life. You got the different businesses. What's the value of it today? What do I want it to be in the future? Every point in time, it's red, green, or yellow. It's on track or not. And does somebody own that outcome? And so I can bounce around where I need to be looking at those things. I've got my personal health. I've got the music side of it, but I can just, the different where I'm at, where I want to go. Am I on track? Yes or no? And then I bounce around. So the thing that's been I'm way better at it today, and I've been really working on it. And I think it's a challenge is focus shifting. Like you're doing something and it's super challenging. It's going sideways or whatever, and then you have to go do this thing. Is just leaving all those emotions over there and fully being here on this thing. It's taken a minute, but that's helped me a lot. How have you
Yeah.
thought focus shifting?
Well, no, that's like, I thank you because I was going to ask you a bunch of questions around how you juggle like running. We run multiple businesses too. There's a certain point where you just look up and it kind of can happen if you're an entrepreneur. And how do you show up appropriately in each of them? Um, I like that you've got, I think if someone's listening to this and they don't have a system, your system as you described it, and I can kind of picture it, might sound complicated, but in the grand scheme, when I look at EOS and like the Gantt charts that I see from some people, the project management systems where they've broken it down into 1,000 tasks, it's quite simple. So one of my first kind of biases is I believe that people cannot operate in complicated systems for very long. But if we can make the system simple and try our best to keep it simple, we can be very consistent in the system. And that consistency often translates to a kind of intensity that is out of the reach of most people. So that gentleman, Kerr, I believe is his name, who just broke the world record for the mile, like crushed it, right? There's a quote I have from him and I can't recite it, but he said, like, I don't do the big workouts. I don't do like the super heavy days, but I show up every day and I will outdo anyone on consistency. And that resonated with me. Like he's the best in the world right now at the thing that he does. And he did it just by showing up every day and trying to get a little bit better. And your red, green, yellow, is it on track? Is it in trouble? It helps you identify and prioritize the things that you as the leader need to dip into. If something's in the red, someone else needs help and the buck stops with you, or you can assign that person, hey, you need help on this project. I'm going to move resources to you.
Well,
So
and specifically, is it increasing in value the way it was designed? So
that's your measure of success.
there's a lot of red, green, yellow that just activity based. Like, why are you measuring this? I don't know, because we always did. I mean, you've seen that too. And what I'm describing is ridiculously simple. And the only goal I'm trying to get at is this is where you and I are completely aligned. What are the things I can do today or the team can do today that will continually and responsibly increase the value of these different businesses?
Yeah. In your way, you're asking the question we wanted people to ask. What's my one thing? What's my priority right now? Because we can only have one priority at a time. The word priority, if you go all the way back to the Latin roots, it means first. So what's the plural of first? Like you can't even say it first. Like it's hard. So like knowing your priority in each moment, right? That allows you to be appropriate today and in the moments today. So I evaded your question like I've been doing this whole time. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a politician on you. You asked me about focus shifting. Um, there are people who struggle to stay focused, and there are people who struggle to shift their focus. And I'm just going to guess because you've already said that's a problem for you, and you're also a musician, that when you're deeply in work, you get into what they call as flow. And flow is a state for someone who's listening. A guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Good luck spelling it. It's like by a vowel Czechoslovakian name. Might be Polish. I can't remember. But he was a professor in Chicago. He's the one who identified this state, and we only get there with our work and our hobbies by the most part. But when people are in flow is when they report the highest levels of happiness and fulfillment, right? It's when you see the basketball player and they're in the zone and it's like they can't miss, they're in flow state. Well, guess what? One of the characteristics of flow state is we lose track of time. We lose track of time. We're so immersed in the activity that we lose cues. So I think I'm like you. And when I hired my first executive assistant, I was pretty kind of upfront. I just said, the part of your job that you're going to roll your eyes at is I need you to kind of nanny me a little bit. And there will be times where you literally need to knock on the door and say, Jay, you've got a podcast coming up. Because there will be an alarm going off on my phone and I won't hear it. So when I have the ability to have an in-person helper, like right now, I'm in a transition moment where my chief of staff is on parental leave and I have to take care of myself, I have backup systems. So I've got a very expensive Apple Watch. And other than recording walks, it doesn't do much more than tell the time. But my favorite thing to do with it is I hold down that little button and I say, set a timer for 45 minutes. I've got a little clock that you can dial right on my thing so that if I see how much longer I have before I have to transition, I'll set it for 45 minutes and then it will beep. So I kind of need something in my environment, my watch, maybe a timer, or in this case, my assistant, that will create an environmental cue for me that it is time for me to shift my attention. So most people they rely on their calendar, and about 15 minutes before they transition, a little notification will pop up. That's not usually enough for me. That's the only notification, by the way, I allow on my digital devices so I'm not distracted. I do want to know because I time block what my next time block is going to be, but I've had to create bigger systems. So that's for all the people like maybe you and me that struggle to transition. Having physical cues can really be helpful.
Yeah, 100%. And it different for everyone. You found something that for sure works for you.
What do
Uh,
you do? How do
so,
you
I,
transition? Or how do you try to transition?
so I have a quick question before I get to that. As we well, actually, I'll back up. So the transition for me, I've got my calendar. I look at the day. I'm aware of it all day long.
Right.
So I just know. Um, and this thing you're talking about, flow. Uh, I've tried meditating before, and I feel like I'm completely wasting my time because the reason I think people meditate is so when they're going through life, they can be better, more in flow. And so for me, everything I do is an opportunity to get better at attaching to that flow state. Does that make sense going
Yeah.
through? So that's how I do it. And for whatever reason, I've reviewed my day. At the end of each day, I'm looking at the next day. I glance at the week, or the next 7 or 10 days. But I'm just aware of it, and I know what I need to do, and I can be fully in one thing, in mostly flow most of the time now. But there was a period decades ago where I couldn't be in flow to save myself. Um, and I'm just aware of it. I almost don't need it, and I rarely miss anything. It's just like an internal clock. So that's how I do it, and it works.
You're like Jack Reacher, the character that always has a clock in his head and just wakes himself up. That's a gift. Maybe you've trained yourself to do it over time. But
Over time, it wasn't always like this for sure.
yeah,
Um,
for most people, by the way, it's the opposite. They don't know how to get into that state. And so they don't have an environment. Usually it's their environment that doesn't support their goals. There's too many distractions in their environment. I'll be working with the client. Oh, I was doing great. And then I got an email and a client was really upset and I just had to go put out that fire. I'm like, okay, how did you know about the email? Well, my phone was there. And how did you know to look at your phone? Well, a notification popped up and I glanced at it. I was like, great. So, based on what you just told me, how could we prevent that from happening? Because in the 30 minutes that you needed to complete the task you were doing, could that client have waited for 30 minutes? Yes. But once you know about it, it's hard to turn your brain off of it. So, a lot of it for people on the other end of the spectrum, how do we create physical barriers between us? Like, there's a lot of science. The farther this amazing computer is, I'm holding up my phone for people listening, the farther this physically away from us, the better we perform. Because even having it in your visual surroundings will tempt you to pick it up. And there are engineers that are building multi-trillion-dollar companies that all of their job is to get us to look at that thing more often.
Yeah. No, 100%. And mine, so another thing I'm working on, my phone is on do not disturb most of the time. And there's a couple of people that can get right through that if they need to. So if an emergency
Yes.
comes up, I'm actually okay rearranging everything on the fly if I'm looking at all of my things that I'm trying to keep on track, need that kind of attention. So
Yes.
I'm okay with it. And working on even having my phone in my pocket or in my sight, ignoring it. So that's another thing too. And so kind of back to this moving meditation and being in flow, even when there's distractions going on, I think for me, this is really good work to be doing.
It is. If you struggle with executive function, right? Is there an epidemic of ADHD out there, or is it just being better diagnosed? I find it to be highly prevalent among the entrepreneurs I work with. And their ability to shift is often a superpower that got them where they were. And now it's undermining them when they need to have more focus. So everybody's got their own, like, which set of problems do you want, right? They're both frustrating if you're living with them. But those people, um, they are the ones like you meditate. Part of the reason people meditate, that's a muscle for being present and just letting the thoughts arise, acknowledging them, but not getting lost in them. I went through like 150 days of meditation and just realized I'm on the end of the spectrum that doesn't really need this. But I do know people that I prescribe it to because it is a pretty fairly proven, you're building a muscle that allows you to kind of like the idea of thinking about nothing is exhausting. And it's very hard to do for most people. But the practice of it is how we build that willpower. It's actually willpower to not pick up our phone, to resist the temptation of opening our email. Those things take actual energy. You can measure it in your blood sugar level. If you're resisting it, you actually have to fuel your brain to keep resisting it, or you will run out of willpower.
Super, super fascinating. Yeah, I just got to a place where if I sit there to be present and I'm building the muscle, the only way I can practice it is in life. So that's how I evolved into it. And I guess it's everybody gets there on their own as they go through it. I've heard you talk about willpower. When I look at material, emotional, spiritual value creation, the positive emotional energy to me is the scarcest commodity on the planet because it supercharges everything we do. And there's lots of hacks to make that go. Like, how important is it? Well, it's directly related to your emotional energy level, your positive emotional energy. So when you think about willpower and all the folks that you've worked with, I think this is the X factor. And I think of the three, and I've definitely created a lot of material wealth so far in my life. That's my strongest one of the three.
Yeah. And there's lots of tricks to that. Like the classic one is like, I'm afraid of heights. And you say, well, if you had to cross a rope bridge over a canyon to save your child, would you do it? And people, oh, of course I would. Like, so you attach meaning to something that's hard and people will do it. So you're constantly flexing that muscle for yourself is what it sounds like, is you're reminding yourself of why things are truly important that gives you extra energy when you don't always have it. So things that are meaningful. We're more likely to do the things that are uncomfortable. We also can practice just doing hard things like going to the gym. My wife and I work out together almost every day, and we're doing hard things together. We're now married 27 years as of a couple of weeks ago. It's not easy, right? It takes work, but practicing doing hard things is a way to, almost all of these things are muscles that you can build over time if we're purposeful about it. But usually in the beginning, if people are truly failing, I start with their environment. I always thought people say, "Oh, I have a yes problem," right? Because we broke down the four things that are the biggest distractors from our productivity, and the inability to say no was number one, right? But that's almost always about your environment. There's either stuff or people in your environment that are asking you things, and if you simply weren't aware of them, you wouldn't have any trouble ignoring them, right? It's only when someone walks in and says, "Can I get a minute?" that you're faced with a yes or no question. But if you have clear hours, like, hey, for the next 2 hours, I'm do not disturb, like you're doing with your phone, and there's very few exceptions for that, then that problem goes away. A lot of managers, mid-level managers, they struggle with this because they have to be accessible both to their bosses and to the people, the other managers they serve. And so they often describe their days as constantly triaging problems up and down the chain, and they don't have any path forward. And just creating an island like a professor, like office hours. Every morning we're going to have a team huddle. If you've got challenges for the day, I'll stick around for an extra 30 minutes and help you with it. How do you create kind of programmable moments where you're accessible so that people will leave you alone when you want to be focused?
Yeah. So this is a pretty, I guess, long-term journey to get good at this, right? I mean, it's not, you don't explain it once and they have it.
Yeah, and I don't think some people might be a little bit more natural. Like I said, they could be on either end of the executive function spectrum. I can be highly focused and engaged, or I struggle with that. Um, so people are all over the map, but the solution always is in repetition and consistency and environment, and we can build muscles and systems to get us much farther. I think, the tortoise always beats the hare, always. The hare is always going to be faster, but the tortoise is consistent. And there's a great life lesson in that. And it's so simple, we just want to ignore it. But almost every entrepreneur I work with, they want to do everything in a series of sprints because their blood pressure goes up. They use a deadline for their intensity. And that all creates stress and cortisol that in the long run is really unhealthy for us. I see people with adrenal failure, burnout, all kinds of things when they try to use those systems for productivity for too long. So at some point, you will either learn to take regularly scheduled breaks or you will get an unscheduled one. And usually, if you get the latter, you figure out, I need to work on this. But we always have an opportunity to work on it along the way. And a lot of the things we've talked about it are all strategies. Just pick one, start doing it, give yourself some grace. You're probably going to suck at it. We almost always suck at things in the beginning. And just make progress. And usually within a month or two, people will look up and be surprised how much better they are. It doesn't take years of practice for most of these things to see measurable progress. Usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks, and people will notice that you are better. So, but it does take those 6 to 8 weeks. So how do we bear down and start building some of these skills that will serve us both in life and work?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, what you're describing is what I've learned, and I started learning it a long time ago, is valuing the struggle. Like I'm going to struggle to build a capability, use it to create value, self-esteem goes up, all of it, and do it enough times. At least for me, the harder it gets, if I know I'm on the right track, I just know it's going to be incredible, and it might be 6 months, it might be 2 years, or whatever it is. And all the way through that, like something I'm working on it more intensely today than ever, but it's internal talk.
Mm,
And I think there's an epidemic that's really harming a lot of individuals out there and how they talk to themselves. And I'm sure you've heard people say it this way. If you heard somebody talking to your kids or your family members or best friends the way you talk to yourself, how would you respond? And most people's like, not well.
no.
Okay, well, that energy is translating. And how do you like, what's the first thing you think about in the morning? Like every time I notice myself negatively or in an unhealthy way thinking about something, someone, myself, whatever it is, I immediately notice it, I catch it, and I shift it to more developmental. How can I develop better strategies, better thinking, better habits, like all of it? And it that also takes a minute, but wow, has it made a difference? Like it,
Oh, yeah, it's huge. I wasn't aware of my self-talk until I got a coach, and they heard my verbal talk and helped me understand that a lot of what was coming out of my mouth started in my head. Um, Sometimes your therapist can help you with that too, or just an intense desire to be more aware of how I'm talking to myself. But I do believe what's between our ears often spills out in the world in ways that we don't expect. And so some of the most important work we can do is on finding ways to give ourselves grace, to love ourselves for where we are and know that we're on a journey. Um, One of the most important books I read on this, I don't think it even made it into the book, was by Dr. Carol Dweck called Mindset. There's a lot of stuff out there on mindset that is a little airy fairy to me. It's not really based in much research, but hers is very grounded. And the idea that failure is how we all learn. And at some point, we learn that failure is bad. And that's a big, big issue for us if we want to grow, right? If we're trying to look good all the time, we're not going to experience much growth because it's kind of required of us to struggle a little bit to grow.
well,
And
how can you improve anything without effort? Mentally, physically, emotionally? So there a lot of folks I've asked the question to, and I have one of the companies I lead right now is called Dinner Table, and we have over 50,000 parents in our Dinner Table family community. And I'll ask a question because we go through struggle and how to value it and change your mindset around it. And a lot of folks have said struggle is bad, doesn't matter what it is. Wait a minute.
that's what I'm writing about right now. There's a quote from a Japanese novel, and I'll butcher it, but it's going to be pretty early in the book. But we go into the storm one person and we emerge another. So, in some ways, the purpose of the storm, right, the struggle, is to evolve us. And if we start to see the pattern, we can start to believe it. So, not trying to be a name dropper here, but like I did actually get to have an ongoing conversation with Dr. Angela Duckworth, who wrote Grit. And she let me sit in on one of her classes. And it was happening around COVID. And we were really struggling with convincing people when we didn't know what was going to happen. Like for about 3 months, like the world could end. We didn't know what, and everybody, like everything got disrupted all at once. And people were very upset and anxious and fearful. And she kind of validated an exercise and even gave me a better way to do it. But when we're going into a storm or someone you love is going into one of these seasons of struggle, it's good to do this little exercise. It'd be like, Lee, think of a time when you were sure you were going to fail and it was really, really hard, but somehow, some way, you came out the other side. I ask that question, and almost everybody, it's all relative, will think of some situation. If you're really young, it might have been, oh, I thought I was going to fail that exam and I was going to have to retake the class. If you're older, it might be, my child was dealing with drug addiction and I wasn't sure we were going to make it, or my marriage. Like the scale of it is personal, but your hard time is your hard time. You can't compare it to anybody else's. But we need to periodically go look backwards and remind ourselves that we wouldn't be here if we weren't already incredibly resilient. And that resilience that's gotten us here, we have to trust that person we're going to be in the future, that they will figure it out too. And it will take work and it will be hard and it will be uncomfortable, but we've got to maintain hope, because if you lose hope that you're going to make it through is when people quit. They quit on themselves and they quit on others. But if we can just remind ourselves that we have this amazing resiliency already, we've already done so many and survived so many hard things, and we may have the scars to prove it. But those are also signs that we can endure again. And we just don't get to choose. Life is going to throw stuff at you, often in combinations. that just feel cruel. And we have the ability to grow in those moments. It might take us years to realize it or appreciate it. But almost always on the other side, people will look back with some weird, perverse form of gratitude for the struggle they went through because they'll realize, or someone will help them see that that helped them evolve into a stronger, better version of themselves.
Yeah. I divide struggles up into two categories, healthy and unhealthy. And sometimes unhealthy ones are thrust upon us. Now, didn't you have a pretty serious back injury and surgery? Did I read that right? Or is that somebody else?
Me, me. Yeah, I've had 3 spinal surgeries so far. One of them was 11 hours on the table, 6 days in the hospital. It was pretty horrendous.
What did so I've gone down 3 times significantly with health issues, like really bad, for and affected me for a minimum of a year to many years, each one of them. And I learned so much that helps me create more value. And what did you learn going through that that's helped you?
A few things, and it's something I again tell the people I work with. First off, we cannot compare how we perform in this season to how we performed in our best season. And so I think a lot of us, when we're beating ourselves up, I don't have any energy. Of course you don't. You had 11 hours of surgery. Your back is healing. It's a miracle that you can walk. And we're comparing ourselves to the wrong version of ourselves. The other one is, what commitments am I holding on to from another season that simply don't apply in this season? And a lot of times, the things that we said yes to in the past, if we really sit back and look, they just don't apply. Yes, you said yes. Yes, you gave your word. Yes, you committed to be on that PTA, panel or volunteer at the school or take over this opportunity. But if life has really thrown you a curveball, that is the moment where we have to sit back and reassess, like what are the commitments that are appropriate in this season and what are the standards? So there's a recalibration that has to happen. And if you do it formally, like literally, I think David Epstein tells people to write them all out on like little Post-it notes. What are all of your current commitments? If you're the one who picks up the groceries, that's one a commitment that you do on a weekly basis and make them visible. And I think I do that through my goal setting system, right? I track them weekly. Like a lot of us are just unaware of all the commitments that we're currently carrying, and we have a standard for doing them. And if we're in a really hard season, sometimes where maybe the business is struggling and we're dealing with health, right? It can happen. It can triangulate. Life is tough. Then we have to ask the question, there will be things that I just simply have to find a way to get done. But there's also things that I can recalibrate both my standards and my commitment to them. It may be that they need to be delayed. You know what? I can't do that today, but I can circle back in a couple of months. People do it to us all the time. And for some reason, it's okay. We often even feel relieved when they cancel on us, but we don't do it for ourselves. So those would be the first 2 things that come to mind. We want to recalibrate both our commitments and our standards. They might make us feel a little bit better about how we're showing up in the moment.
Yeah, love that. Great advice. I developed a mantra, be your best when you're at your worst. And so I wouldn't swirl and go down. And then when it got really, really bad, my sense of humor always saved me like, oh, wow, what, what is going on here? So that was good. Hey, if our listeners want to learn more about your work and connect with you, Jay, how can they best do that?
Well, Jay Papasan, if they type it into Google, so far as I know, out of 8 billion people, I'm the only one that they're going to find. So it's hard for me to hide, but if they go to jpapasan.com, they can see everything that I'm doing. Can I share a quote from my friend Jim Quick about what you just said?
Please.
I attribute this to him because he posted it and didn't attribute it to anyone else. He wrote, on the days that you only had 40% to give and you gave 40%, you gave 100%.
And be kind to yourself.
Yeah, what a reframe, right? What a reframe.
Yeah. I think we've lost in the music industry artists like Michael Jackson and others that I considered 1 in a billion. I've just had a great interview and conversation with 1 in 8 billion. So this is amazing. So
There we go. Thank you.
All right. Thank
That's
you
the
so much.
first time I've ever been put in the same category as Michael Jackson. That's a fact.
There you go. But thank you so much for being here. I've learned a lot just getting ready for this. And I spend way over an hour a day developing myself, and the having amazing guests like you are a huge part of my development path. So thank you.
Thank you. And it shows. It shows how thoughtful you are and how you're trying to be as a human being and grow as one. It's really inspiring. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And same back to you. So again, thank you. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, I for sure did. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, show your value to the world.